Do you typically do hour-long conversations, or what's your
It
preference?
depends. I don't really have a preference.
Yeah.
It's kind of based on how the conversation goes.
Right.
Some of them have probably been too long. I've done 5-hour ones, and that
Oh my
gets a little,
gosh.
yeah, 5 hours.
Did you release that in several parts?
No,
or-
just one long clip. Yeah, I
Dang.
do the one
Yeah.
and done.
And you do all your own editing and
Yeah.
everything?
It's not quite big enough for me to contract that out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I enjoy it. This is the fun part. The editing's a little more work, but
I
it's
had a
worth it.
podcast for with a buddy for a while. And
Oh, did you?
The editing was like, oh my God.
You guys did it all yourself?
I noticed that as soon as she kind of moved on to other things, like that was when production went from like a weekly thing to like, maybe it's monthly, maybe it's maybe we're not doing it anymore because it's a lot of work to take on
And
your
if you get
own.
backloaded, it gets dangerous.
Yeah, right. Well, and then you lose a little bit of that kind of like a little bit of the enthusiasm almost, it's like it's not quite as immediate, the conversation took place a while back. It doesn't feel quite as relevant. And yeah, totally.
That's the problem I've noticed is if you wait too long, then you're editing it and all the points that you're making are outdated. And it's like, this happened a month ago.
Right,
Nobody's
yeah.
going to want to listen to this now. That's
Yeah.
one of the balancing acts is trying to get the speed as well as make it a good conversation.
Yeah. Well, especially if you haven't figured out how to pay yourself from it yet. It's like, how do you balance that with the
Pressure's,
things that do pay the bills?
The pressure's on. What was your podcast about?
We started talking about, it was right when cannabis legalization was coming online and, a lot of the permits and all of that was coming through. And so we wanted to kind of do this like look at what the cannabis culture had been in this area and what legalization was likely going to turn it into. So we kind of looked at it this kind of like dying, almost kind of like a dying tribe, like how you would go as an anthropologist into an area if like you're watching a tribe die out and you're like, well, this is it. This is the way, the end of a certain way of life. So yeah, we did that for a season and then kind of pivoted into some other things. And yeah, it's still out there. I pay for for it to live on. It just hasn't been touched in a while.
Hasn't been updated.
Yeah. So
that's an interesting take. Are you from here? Are you from Humboldt?
I've lived here long enough that I kind of feel like I get to call myself a local. I moved up here as a teenager. I'm 40
Yeah,
now,
I think that
so
counts.
I was like,
I think you're in.
Yeah.
Why the take on cannabis? Is that just a geographic choice where we are kind of in the heart of it?
No. I mean, my life had definitely been touched by the cannabis world, and my friend as well. And so it just it was still at that time where people didn't really feel comfortable telling their stories, They really, a lot of people still wanted to use aliases. Yeah, and I think just it was something near and dear to our hearts because we knew, having been close to that world for a long time, we knew, because there was kind of like the larger perception of it, it's just like, oh, these, I don't know if I can swear on your show. I don't even know if we're recording or not. Oh, we are. Okay. Hey, here we are.
You can swear.
This is where we were going to start, but
everything
here we
goes.
are. Yeah, there was the perception of like the grower and who just, comes up here and, is just trying to extract and make a shit ton of money and is putting up all these greenhouses. And that's where things have gone, obviously. But we also knew that it had this much more humble origin story that didn't really get as much airtime. And so we wanted to tell those stories because those were the people that weren't going to be able to make the transition, and a lot of them didn't because they were always just these really small time farmers, just wanted to live a really simple, peaceful, self-sustaining life. And they can't.
Got pushed out.
They can't. Yeah, totally. And a lot of people weren't able to, there was no like job retraining. It's not like, like the steel mill closed down and it was like, it's okay. We're going to teach you how to make fiber optic cables. It was just a whole group of people that had, been trying to live a simple, peaceful life. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I'm in my 50s. I'm in my 60s. I have no idea how to,
do anything else.
Do anything else and, pivot at this age. And so, yeah, that was the stories that we wanted to tell. So,
well, it's very tied to agriculture as a whole in that sense, right? Those mom and pop farmers that get pushed out when big business comes in and buys up all the land. I think Bill Gates is now the #1 owner of farmland in the United States.
Oh, gross.
Which, how crazy is that? And then all these people who have just been doing it as a way of life, subsistence
Mm-hmm.
farming, they just get pushed to the wayside.
Yeah.
And cannabis, especially that lifestyle of just being one with the nature that is so entwined
Mm-hmm.
with the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And to just lose that because some tobacco industry came in and now you can't compete with them. How do you
Yeah.
compete with a business that big?
Yeah. And I mean, it's everything because you look at our area right now, right, with like, the housing issues going on. And I mean, I can imagine being a young family trying to think about first time home ownership, like wages have stagnated here for how many decades? And, and you have how many like, mega conglomerates coming in and buying up all the little cottages and renovating them and turning them into, $300 a night Airbnbs. Like, so it's pretty widespread, systemic. It's everywhere.
Yeah, I
It's just,
don't think any industry is safe. When they realize that there's money to be made,
yeah, right?
it's a fair game.
Yeah, yeah. So
Do you
anyway,
do you have any ties to the cannabis industry in a growing sense, or were you just consuming?
no. I'm one of those rare people in Humboldt County that I actually I can't smoke pot. It makes me a weirdo. Yeah, I get
Oh,
very
really?
paranoid, and it's not a good plant for me. No problem with people that enjoy that. They should enjoy that. It's not something. It's not the plant for me. I had to learn that the hard way several times as a teenager. First
Trial
moving
and
up here,
error.
like, oh my god, why does everyone else seem to be having a fun time? I'm not having a fun time.
That's so funny
Um,
that you did a podcast on cannabis then.
it was more it was the people. I wanted to tell those stories of the people and the way that they were choosing to live in just this more simple, sustainable manner,
You were
because
looking at the lifestyle.
yeah, I wanted to tell those stories, the people that kind of had that initial like back to the land. I mean, because what it's become now is just this gross extractive, one more extractive capitalist, mega business. And that's not interesting, but people that, just want to live in a really beautiful, outside the system kind of way. That's a story I'm interested in. So yeah, it was more that.
Well,
Weed, I don't know how much I care about weed, to be honest. It's more,
it's
it
just
was
the
the people
story.
connected to them. Yeah, yeah.
Did you bring on people that were in that realm, the cannabis realm, to talk to?
Yeah, yeah. So it's all lives
I'm gonna have to check out your
on
podcast
yeah.
now.
So Mend is what so I think our website's mendpodcast.com. If you go there, you can find all this. So we had some trimmers, we had some growers, we had some people that were, had kind of been living under the radar doing some quote unquote distribution out in other parts of the US, and so just people who had been touched by that and worked in that world in one form or another. So yeah, it's out there,
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
And how is that viewed in the realm of the church? Just drug
Right.
use as a
Yeah,
whole.
just
How does
to
that come into
totally
play?
pivot to yeah, and here
Yeah.
we are. Actually, we've you reached out because I work for the Humboldt Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I'm currently their director of basically lifespan spiritual development.
It's kind of a open-ended title there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So they can just keep throwing lots of stuff in that goodie bag. Yeah, it is. It is. It's kind of a mouthful too. It's interesting. I I've been with that particular community, the fellowship, for about 3 years now, in a professional capacity. It's interesting because, and so it's like you say, church. So this is a group of people that actually is very allergic to that word, church, right? Because you're getting a lot of people that come to this world who have trauma. They've suffered spiritual abuse. They grew up in an environment where they were told that, God and, eternal love and acceptance and all the beautiful things you want from your spiritual home are not available to them because they're gay, or they're non-binary, or they don't subscribe to a certain set of beliefs. So yeah, church is off
That's a
limits. So we don't
no-go.
use that word. Um, but it's interesting because I grew up I'm a similar background to, I guess, a lot of the people who come with similar wounding. Is I grew up I'm the kid of my dad was the child of Baptist missionaries. My mom's like full, born again conservative Christian parents. I think they, when I was a child, my dad taught Sunday school and my mom played, the church piano and did the church choir. I mean, so a lot. And then I went to private Christian school 5 days a week.
So you
So
were ingrained in the culture.
totally, totally. And then I left home, was kicked out of home at 16. And so I was like, well, great, I'm done with that. I never need to step foot in a religious setting ever again, like 16, I'm done with that, moving on. And then I had a friend, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, who had been connected to this community at HUUF, at the fellowship, who she had been there because she really was finding a really rich, rewarding experience for her kids and for herself. And just the community there was really, really rich. And she's like, you should come check this out. I'd lived here at that time for 20 years or something. I'm like, where is this place? I've never even heard of it. And so I made my way out there. And for sure, I think the first day there was a lot of kind of quote unquote churchy elements that was like, what am I doing here? There's hymnals and they're passing an offering basket and all these little things that I remembered from it. So it was a little like, whew.
Flashbacks.
Why am I here? Is this the right place for me? But the people were so night and day from what I remember experiencing as a child. I mean, you've got it's just such a wide open array, wonderfully accepting, diverse paths and experiences. And that's kind of the main ethos is like, you walk in and the whole energy is you don't have to believe what we believe. This isn't like you subscribe to these particular beliefs and then you can be part of our club. It's just, it's welcoming. So yeah, the cannabis thing it's not that big a deal. It turns out actually in that world. Yeah. So
That subscribing to a belief system it can be dangerous because it's a box, right? Especially with Christianity and Catholicism as a whole, or in the past, if you tried to push up against those boundaries, you could be banned from the church and cast out from that community. And if you are like you, or like most people, if you grow up in that church, these are the people that this is your family, your friends, the people you see on Sundays, you do all these communal activities with, and then to say, well, I don't really agree with this aspect of it, you can get outcast. And that's scary for a lot of people.
Totally. I mean, if you figure, there was some study I read recently that was saying how social isolation is actually more damaging to your health than like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, just because we're hardwired to be social creatures. We need each other. I think that's part of why the last few years was so difficult for people, because not only were we dealing with this, crazy unknown ailment lingering in the air, we also didn't have connections to one another.
You couldn't go see anybody.
Totally.
You're stuck in your house every day.
Totally. So yeah, that thought of being ostracized or cast out of your tribe, so to speak, because you won't say, yes,
you don't check these boxes.
Yeah, totally.
What, is there a predominant religion amongst your group? Or does everybody kind of believe their own thing? Would you even say that you guys subscribe to a predominant religion, or it's just more of a spirituality aspect?
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting too, because it's like, so I come from a place where, so after leaving home, I spent probably the next 15 or so years, like really diving down that spiritual rabbit hole. So that languaging for me is right on. Yeah, I'm like spiritual. That's, like let's talk about different, paths of mysticism and different philosophies and ways of knowing and, conceptualizing the universe and our place in it. Like that. Yeah, that's my jam. But then you get a whole range of people, everything from like, atheist, humanist, who, I have to kind of give a trigger warning. I sang a song the other day for the congregation, and I was just like, just a trigger warning, guys. I'm going to use the G word here. I'm going to say God, and you can substitute whatever word you want for that, because I know some of you, that's a hot button word. There's a lovely, like a Buddhist Sangha that meets there regularly that's connected to us, and they, follow the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, and do all the kind of like Plum Blossom Village lineage stuff. So that's connected to us. There's historically been like a pagan group that meets regularly there and does some earth-based rituals. You have some. I don't know that we have a lot of Christians. I think I think it's maybe safe to say that's a smaller portion of the community. But I think, so what really defines, kind of any congregation, any community that wants to define itself as Unitarian Universalist, is there's these 7 principles to which they just ask people to consider and to begin to work to embody, basically, things like the worth and dignity of every human being, or, acknowledging and embracing the interdependence of all life. I mean, stuff that if you think about it is, we should probably all be able to sign on, say yes to.
Yeah, good tenets, right?
Yeah. So it's pretty wide ranging. Yeah. You get a whole.
Well, Buddhist to pagan is a pretty
Right.
big leap.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can feel a little bit like, spiritual buffet land a little bit, like let's do a little meditation here and let's do a little earth-based ritual here, and which is lovely. I think you could probably, if someone is really wanting to go deep on one particular spiritual lineage, it's maybe not the best place, because it's much more wide-ranging, I would say. It's not the place, like if you really, really want to explore, like, Reform Judaism and get deep into that, we have beautiful temples here that you can go connect with, but HUUF is probably not the place to start.
You guys are more, if you're trying to find an alternate route. You guys kind of have a taste of everything. You can see, oh, there's this, there's also this. There are these different ways of thinking outside of the structure of the main religions.
Yeah.
Or the big ones.
Well, and I think it's also like so much of it is about it's about community. It's you have people that recognize the value in creating a space where you can come and you can temporarily step out of those really limiting definitions of you're not defined by your job, you're not defined by your income, you're not defined by your sexual orientation, you're not defined by your past trauma. You can just come and be welcomed and have this beautiful, restorative, regenerative, connecting experience with other people, and that there's value in that. And so much of it, it's almost less about what we say we believe, although that's it's a piece of it. And there's a huge bent towards social justice. It's like, let's not just talk about what we believe, but let's actually roll up our sleeves and fucking get to work here, but it's so much of it is really about just fostering that sense of community, that sense of connection, I would say. So
now, why does that social justice aspect come into play? Because you don't normally hear that tied up in spiritual groups or religious groups.
I mean,
is that just because the community is these people who have these scars from these other areas that they want to try to help give back or help others in some way?
It may be a piece of it, but I think it's also comes from just a larger acknowledgement. I mean, because, when we're talking, UUism, like it's a whole huge nationwide organization, so it's not just one little, group
Local.
of people in Bayside saying, hey, let's do this. They're connected to this much larger ecosystem and philosophy and movement that says, we as spiritual seekers or as values-driven people, as people that are connected to a faith, to a religion, of as UUism is defined as a religion, we have this potential to do tremendous good in the world. We have resources, we have status, we have tax exempt status, because we're a religious organization, like we are poised to do tremendous good in the world. And wouldn't it just be a complete shame if all we were was just talking heads, just people that came together to like, oh, that felt really nice. We sang some songs and, we had some coffee together and, talked about all the things that we believe in. But it really, we aim to be a place where people can step in, So like one of the things we started doing in the last year And part of it was, was my, my own frustration. It was just like, we got to create a space here. If Sunday is the only vehicle we have right now for people to gather, we have to create a space to like do
Do
the
something.
thing. Yeah. So we started doing the fourth Sunday of the month. We've been doing what we're calling Social Action Sunday. So each fourth Sunday, we partner up with another nonprofit organization like, the North Coast Environmental Center. We're partnering with them for September and doing a coastal cleanup effort with them. We've partnered with Cooperation Humboldt or Centro del Pueblo, or we did stuff with the food bank, where everyone came together and we organized food for 3 hours, and it was amazing. So it's one of those things where it doesn't ask too much of us. We just have to shift our focus. It's like, okay, rather than coming and sitting in a room and talking about this, which just has value as well, what if we just took a quarter of that energy and pivoted it into action? So that's been exciting to watch that transpire. I don't think I answered your question.
No, well, that tracks, right? Is you have all these people together. You're all coming together for one reason or another. You might as well do something with that, right? You might as well point that energy towards something good. And I do believe even the act of just coming together and doing yoga or doing meditation, like that is valuable. That definitely has its place.
Mm-hmm.
But that was always something I noticed, especially with the Catholic Church. That's what I was brought up in.
Yeah.
Is you just come together for this week, for this one day in a week, right? And then you're like absolved. That's all the work you really have to do, right? You go, maybe you say the 10 Commandments, you recite that, you go, you do whatever you have to do, you talk to the priest, and then you're cleared for the week. All your sins are absolved, and you can go repeat the cycle next week.
Yeah. Do you still practice?
I don't.
That?
I was kind of like how you were. When I was old enough, I took a step back.
Yeah.
But it's weird, and I'm sure you might be able to appreciate this. When I try to think about how I feel with religion, it seems like it's kind of a murky situation because I can't separate what was ingrained in me as a child versus how I feel now, like on a conceptual basis, because you're a kid and you're so malleable and you're getting these ideas thrust on you of, this is God, this is what he expects from you, this is what you're supposed to do to be a good person. And then as you get older and you start having these new experiences, there's a disconnect of, well, okay, this wasn't exactly true, so where does you start pulling on threads, and it can get very dangerous.
Well, and I think it can unravel the whole thing. I mean, because I remember, you figure your 20s, right, is kind of when you're coming, and I don't know how old you are. Maybe you're in your 20s right now. Yeah, exactly.
I'm kind of right in there.
So I feel like my late teens, early 20s was like, I was just pissed off for like almost a decade, basically, because that was the time. I mean, you're likely going to college, and you're finally breaking free of some of the constraints and the channeled version of reality or information that you were getting handed by your parents, and it probably wasn't coming from a place of
malice. It never
exactly. They're doing the best with the information and the beliefs that they have been that they've inherited. But man, I just coupled with just even learning more about the realities of like climate change and our political system and the history of colonialism and racism in this country, and just like, so it's like you have that whole piece of it, and you're like, why did no one tell me these things? Because especially growing up, I mean, I went to a private Christian school that had its own little private Christian curriculum.
Yeah, you were insulated.
Oh my God. I mean, I had like textbooks that literally said like, Columbus came to the New World to bring God's love to the Indians. And I mean, there's so many things in that sentence now where I'm just like, it's so many levels of cringe there. But like, so it was that coupled with, just the spiritual information too, and it just fed left. So there were so many layers where I felt like I had been deceived, and it throws you, so it's like, and I think there's something about it in there too, like the part of it that feels really, really insidious is if all you're given is this kind of indoctrination, like, no, this is the truth. There's not different versions. There's
It's
not
an
shades of
absolute
gray.
version.
This is it. This is the version. Everything else is gonna get you sent to, the bad place. Um, it trains you out of trusting yourself. It seems like the greatest tragedy to me, because um, I don't know how much personal story you want
No,
to
yeah.
hear. When I was like, I don't know, my daughter is 10 now. And so I'm thinking back. So like maybe when I was like 11, I had inadvertently started up this kind of like clandestine secret library in the back of my closet. And you would think there would be all sorts of like really like bad thing, this is where I kept my bong or whatever. It was nothing, it was like I had books on Zen, on Buddhism, on paganism, on, just existential philosophy. I had like, the CDs with the swears that I wasn't allowed to listen to, like all this beautiful art and literature that my parents were like, no, 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 that I was like, I can't share this part of me that's hungry for more, for different takes on life. So I literally had this like, secret stash of Buddhist texts and, Tori Amos in the back of my so
Not standard for most kids. I think
I guess
most kids would probably go the bong route, or they've got a couple beers back there.
Right, yeah. That came later. That, went with the rest. But yeah, early on it was just information, because it was like this sense of, this doesn't feel like it for me, like I know I'm being told like this is the truth and this is, the way things are. But there was just, it still at a young age felt like there's something more that I'm not being told or I'm not being let in on.
Yeah,
And
they're
I was,
keeping this from me.
yeah. And I don't even know if that was the thought, but just like there was more than they were able to give me and I wanted it. So I had to go find that on my own. So as a parent, it's interesting because my child's being raised with like almost the opposite of
She's got way more access to stuff
um
as far as
sh-
information.
and she's just being, I see the confidence it instills in her to know that it's like, we talk about the differences in our belief system. She's 10 and by no means am I like, oh, you're only 10. You don't know what you think. I'm like, tell me what you think, because it's interesting to me and things I don't know. So she and I have this, conversation back and forth, like, well, mom believes in God. And what does that mean to you? Who is this? Is it a man? Is it a woman? Is it both? Is it neither? Where do they live? Like, and she's just like, yeah, I don't believe in God. I'm like, cool. Great. Tell me more about that, and there's no weirdness. There's no guilt. There's no fear.
There's no pressure to subscribe to a different way because that's how your family is.
Yeah. And I feel like that's going to serve her down the line, because she's not worrying that she's going to disappoint me or be eternally damned.
That's the big one, right? Is that it's not, these choices carry such an extreme weight. It's go to heaven or go to hell forever, for the rest of your life. This blip that you're experiencing on earth is nothing compared to eternity. And if you make the wrong choice, you're going to go to hell and you're going to be stuck there forever. And imagine telling that to a child, that if they mess up and they mess up enough, that's it. That's it for you. This is where you're going to go. Even if you're just born into it, if you're gay, if you're non-binary, if you fit into those categories and you're in the church, sorry, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just born wrong. And that's what they tell you. And then I think that has gotten better. At least in some aspects and in some communities. They've become way more accepting to...
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of progressive Christian communities out there who are doing a really beautiful job.
Yeah, I don't want to discount those groups.
Absolutely.
But historically, it was, even when I was a kid, if you were gay, it was not, you definitely didn't tell anybody, and you tried to keep that as closed-mouthed as you could, because you would be cast out from the church.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? And that's just how it is.
Yeah.
You were just born into the wrong box.
And, I think there's something really compelling and seductive about that kind of absolute truth, because I think there's something I think it feels like we live right now at this, very tumultuous time, very uncertain time.
Yeah, now especially.
It does. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's always been this way. We just are more aware of what's happening all around us on a global level, but it feels very tumultuous. Everything feels so uncertain. And so I can understand, how compelling it would feel to be like, well, at least I have like this whole like nature of God and the universe thing figured out, like I know this, like I got this down. If I do this, I say this, I vote like this, I pray like this, I live like this, then I'm guaranteed this outcome, this good outcome at the end. I can't be guaranteed a good outcome in this life, but I can be guaranteed a good outcome after it, and there's something really, man, especially if you're suffering in this lifetime, that's got to be.
There's a lot of power in that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
having the uncertainty taken out of life, because that's
yeah,
all life is otherwise. If you
yeah.
take out this structure of, okay, follow these steps and God will love you and you can go to heaven, versus the alternative of, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I don't know what steps I need to take. I don't know what happens if I do this versus if I do that. Am I going to
Or
lose
even,
everything?
or even the no one actually knows how this ends. There's definitely no certainty that your life in this human body is going to end well. And there's really no certainty about what happens after you exit,
That's the
like
big
that's
one.
like,
And people, if you have the structure of there is something after, to have that taken away to, well, there might just be emptiness. You might just have this one existence and then it's a wrap.
yeah,
That's a scary concept.
totally.
Again, especially if you have the rigid structure of there is a an Eden out there for you to end up at, and you live your life like that for any period of time. To have that rug pulled out can be, I mean, you hear about these people that are in these fundamentalist church groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so structured and so extreme, and then they come out from that one way or another and their whole life is turned upside down.
Hmm.
It's like they're on shaky ground and they don't know where to step anymore because
Mm-hmm.
they lost that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and again, I think it speaks to all the framework was done externally. You didn't develop that capacity to trust your intuition, to trust your own doubts or inner knowing. The only you really leaned hard or flexed that one muscle about conforming,
You were
right?
taught
You're
not to
really, really
question.
good at doing what you're told to do. But as
Yeah.
soon as you're put in a situation where it's just like, I need to make some choices for myself and I need to kind of use my own, you know, wisdom as a guide or as a barometer of what to do next, like you haven't developed that in that
You don't have
setting.
the tool.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. So I think yeah, it's circling back. I guess it's been beautiful to work and be in a setting in a community that really is just about creating support and connection and community around like we're here for whatever you want to look into. It's like if you want to really get into your meditation practice, great. We want to help support you in that. If you want to just really geek out on, the meaning of life and our socio-political structures and, how we, subvert those and fight back against injustice and don't want to think about God at all. Great. We're here for that. So, yeah, it's been a really nice thing to be connected to that community.
What made you revolt from Christianity? Was it just that idea of there's more information out there that I'm not gaining access to? Was there something else? Because some people don't, right? Some people are brought up in that and ride it till the wheels fall off. And then
Yeah.
there are others who there's like a little switch that gets flipped.
Hmm.
And at one point they start saying, well, this doesn't quite sound right. And like I said, they start pulling on these threads and it comes to an unraveling point.
Um, I think a lot of it just, again, it boils down to just that I needed to be able to trust myself. I needed to be able to find a life that wasn't based upon someone else's rules for me because I just didn't know how to build that life,
But
like
you knew that it was out there for you.
I didn't. I just knew that I couldn't build the one that was being presented me, like, my parents had a really lovely script that, that probably would have made for a very safe and stable life, like they would have paid for me to go to a nice Christian college. They would have, been really excited for me to go and marry a, nice cisgendered white guy, and not white. They're not quite that, far down the conservative rabbit hole, but, but just, someone else who believed exactly as they did, and, have a very gender role, traditional marriage. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. I just knew that, whatever life I was going to be a part of, I had to feel myself in it. I had to feel like, I was reaching out into the thing that was meant for me, not just what someone else's idea of what my life was supposed to be, I think. So I just didn't know how to do it. I think I was really, really good, really young at doing the script, right? You
Pretending.
learn the rules, you learn like what's okay and what's not okay, what parts of you can share in what settings, and what parts of you need to kind of like, have a special section in your
Keep under
closet.
wraps. Yeah, the closet.
Right. And it's just so exhausting. It's so exhausting, especially as a child, right? And I think, when so basically I was, 16, and my mother was the one, she basically was just like, you're not living by our rules. We have these certain rules around like, smoking the pot, or, having sex before marriage, or whatever it is, you get back in line with the rules we have for you, or you leave. And I was like, I can leave? Like, I didn't even know that was an option. Like, so, I mean, I grabbed my backpack and hitchhiked up to a friend's house. And, there was many, many twists and turns after that. But I think it was just someone showing me the door, even though I had no idea where that door went to. I just knew I couldn't be in that, nice little warm, safe container that was being offered me. So,
Were you afraid? Was there any hesitation in leaving? Because you're 16, and this
right.
is the only life you've known is with your parents. And then you have that little crack in the door of you can get out, and this might be your only chance, but it's also you're leaving your family. That's kind of a daunting choice for a
Right.
16-year-old.
I think, things had gotten compressed and bad enough at that point that it was like whatever was out there waiting for me had to be better than that. Just because there's just at a certain point, it's if you're not living from a place of deep authenticity, you're always looking outside yourself, I guess, for those external cues that you're doing it right. And I mean, I was never all that good at doing it right anyway. I was my parents' problem child. So I think I got tired of being a problem, honestly. I was like, it's too hard to be your problem. I'm going to go be my own problem. Why don't you turn your efforts towards something else, and I'll go see if I can start the work of, piecing myself back together, Humpty Dumpty style, whatever that means. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers that
Yeah.
sufficiently.
It'd be harder to leave, right, if it was a perfect home life and
Yeah.
everything was going great, and then you had this crack, because then you're balancing, well, I do really love it here, but there is this other thing out there that might be better,
Right.
versus, man, something's got to change. You hit
Mhm.
that point where it's just not sustainable. You can't keep up the act. You can't keep pretending. And if you get that glimmer of hope that, oh, there could be something. It doesn't even have to be that there is something. It's just the thought that there might be something out there that's
Mhm.
better, or that's different, or that's going to help you, and jumping on that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and I think, there's something, it's funny just how, life moves in cycles. I feel like some lessons that I kind of touched in on in my, my teens and early 20s, I'm circling back to in a new way now at 40. And it's like, there's something powerful in no, just, saying, I don't
That's a lesson
know
I'm
what I'm
still trying to
saying.
learn.
Well, I think, just you might get to keep learning it a while. It might be kind of this
It's one of those
labyrinth type
lessons.
thing where you learn it a little here and then you circle back around and learn it again, learn it in a new way. Um, I think, yeah, there's just something, even if you don't know what you're saying yes to yet, I think there's something really powerful in just getting that clear no. Like, I can't. I can't keep moving in this direction. I need something that's not this, because then it opens up, I think, possibilities for a potential yes, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, or even just putting you on a different path,
Mm-hmm.
right? It doesn't even have to be your final path. That's just pivoting off of the path that you know is not right for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easier to know if something doesn't fit. Sometimes it's a little harder to know if it does fit, or if you are making the right choices, but you know if you're making the wrong choices. Those are pretty definitive, I think, most times.
I think that's great that that's your experience. I
You don't have that?
sometimes, no, I mean, sometimes you get a clear hit, right, in your body or in your
I
gut
guess
really
I don't
early.
mean instantaneously,
Yeah.
but I feel like I never really know if I made the right choice looking back, but I always know if I made the wrong choice looking back. I can look back and
Well,
say, this was
right.
not, yeah,
Hindsight's
this was
pretty
not,
clear.
should not have had to learn this lesson, but we did.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
I guess it is a hindsight thing. It'd be nice if you could tell in the moment and say, oh, if I make this choice, I'm going to be, kicking back on a beach in 5 years with $20 million.
But I do think we can like flex, strengthen that muscle, so to speak. Like the more we make those choices that are kind of intuitively guided, when we have those little hits of like, just get those little like feelings that, something in your body that's kind of a like, ooh, because we have those, right? When we, we're around someone who, for whatever reason, I just don't vibe with that person, and then it turns out later, it's like, we learn all this shady stuff about them or something, or, we have the moment where we're about to like, I don't know, enter in a financial agreement with someone, but there's something that's like, I need to sleep on this. And then it turns out, so it's like, I feel like we can train ourselves to get better. So it doesn't always have to be hindsight.
Yeah. It's trusting yourself. Like you said, like
Yeah.
developing that muscle of listening to your gut and following what you feel is right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't know if you're a poetry person at all, but
that's an interesting question. I don't read poetry, but I'm a fan of poetry.
Yeah. I remember one of the first poems I ever became enamored with as a teenager was the line from E.E. Cummings where he says to be nobody but yourself in a world that would have you be, I'm totally bastardizing these beautiful words, but to be nobody but yourself in a world that would have you be everybody else is like one of the most powerful things that you can do. And that resonated so strongly with me when I was younger. And it was like, okay, yeah, I don't even know if I fully understand what that means, but these are words I'm going to like ingrain upon my heart and being, and I'm going to like carry that with me as I move forward and to whatever comes next. So, yeah, I think there's a power that when we develop when we start doing that listening to ourselves. So
it's important. It is an important muscle to develop.
Yeah,
just being able to trust yourself and trust that if you do mess up, you will be able to pick yourself back up. Mm-hmm. That's one of the big things.
Right. And again, just back to like that larger thing of like community. I mean, so to be in a community that welcomes differences of opinion, differences of belief, differences of practice, differences across all of lifestyle, of, all sorts of things. This is, we trust you, even though you show up in this life differently than I do. You don't act and believe in, exactly as I do, but we trust you to be, a good, decent, human being, and to come and co-create this beautiful communal experience with us, that's powerful, and then you create those connections where, when you do, like you spoke to just now, just, picking yourself back up. It isn't that American thing of picking yourself back up. It's you have that community, that net, that safety weaving around you, and which is how we're supposed to do it anyway. Like we were never designed to have to do it all on our own. Like we're designed to be in community and connection with one another, so that when there is that faltering, that you
have somebody to lean on. That's the whole idea, right? That's the whole idea behind community and finding people that you can jive with, is everybody's looking out for each other. Everybody's going to help each other. You're not going through life alone.
Yeah.
You have someone.
Yeah.
So after 16, did you start getting involved into spirituality? Is that kind of the path that you got on, or you were just over all of it?
I think I was on the chain smoking and angry music path for a good long while. That was part of my spiritual practice. And eventually that kind of morphed into something a little bit more sustainable. So yeah, I don't know, at this point now, I've been a yoga teacher for 13 years, I think. So, and I think at a certain point, I was so tired of being angry. You know, it was really, really powerful fuel to launch me out of the world my parents had created for me. Um, and at a certain point, I just couldn't be angry anymore. You know, it's like that kind of heat will it'll burn you up and
It's not
everything around you.
sustainable.
It's not. Yeah, you need to kind of move to a different fuel source. So I think at a certain point, yeah, that turned into more inquiry, looking into, a lot of yoga was really appealing to me because it was, there's not really much mention in a lot of spiritual traditions, really, of the body, of how we what a beautiful, holy, divine thing it is to connect with your physical self, and even, in a lot of those traditions, the body's a very sinful thing and you should, just basically concentrate on, from the, the
Yeah,
neck
cover
up.
everything
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. So that became a real beautiful place for me to land. So I think before I started teaching and getting trained to be a teacher, I spent a good just decade just in yoga studios, just so hungry for that kind of experience, So that was, for a while, that was a very, very beautiful healing place for me to be. So.
And yoga is spiritually entwined, right? I mean, there's the aspect of that. I mean, you don't have to say spirituality, it's the mind-body connection, right? And there's something kind of, I don't know what the word would be, but there's something interesting and unique about that when you're doing these poses. Or so I've been told. I haven't done yoga. I want to get into yoga just for longevity purposes. I do a lot of weightlifting and my body is
Ah.
kind of
Oh
tightening.
yeah,
I'm
you're
getting
tight. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I would always.
I'm
Yeah.
getting to that point where it's okay, we got to start focusing more on
That would be a
mobility.
very good complementary activity for you to get into.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I don't want to be that guy who's, in his 40s and is hunched over and tight but just jacked and it's like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
It's good functional movement. It will help kind of like balance. I had a teacher that talked about, it's a very holistic form of movement. It'll give you strength if that's what you're needing. It'll help fortify those parts of you, but it will also, give you openness and, limber you up and expand you if that's what you're needing as well. So it's a pretty versatile form of movement. But I mean, if you look at like the origins of it, it's so tough to especially if you're looking at from the outside peering into it. Like yoga as we know it in our commodified culture, right? Is exercise with like spiritual, I don't know, little accessories attached to it,
It's like
right?
fluff. You're just kind of sprinkling it on there just to give it a little
Let's
flair.
come and get a workout and then put our hands in our heart and say
Namaste.
namaste. Like we really don't have a clear connection and reverence to what the original practice was, and still is in large, in many parts of India. I mean, but it's meant to be. So it's like what we practice here in the West, right? Just the asana, the physical postures, is this tiny, tiny little fraction of what I mean. There's a whole like epistemology and philosophy, and there's deities and there's different precepts on how to be living one's life, and it's a whole pathway. But that's a lot harder. So we tend to just kind of go for like, ooh, let's do the stretchy, fun, like, ooh, and let's do the Instagrammable stuff too, right? Because that's really cool and in some ways much more accessible. In some ways it's easier to do a handstand than it is to really look at like, go deep within and, look at parts of yourself that are difficult to grapple with. So, yeah, we we get kind of the yoga light in our culture, unfortunately. So
Do you delve a little deeper into that in your life?
I think again, it's just I'm just so hungry for that. I think when I look out kind of at just the general, when I look at the world and I see the level of injustice and I see the things happening, particularly to people that have marginalized identities, and I see that those systems are set in place to continue that injustice, and I feel really, really powerless, as a single individual to change that. My go-to is I need a spiritual framework to look at all, to view all of this from. I need to understand myself not just as this finite white woman from a certain socioeconomic background. I need to understand myself from a more kind of, it's going to sound really hippy-dippy, but kind of a cosmic, more eternal, big picture place. And I need to be able to have a framework to encounter and interact with others from that same place, to that place that says we're so much more than those really, really limiting definitions that the world is willing to hand us. I think of spirituality as kind of like Fight Club sometimes, how, it's like you're not your job, you're not your car, you're not your fucking khakis, but instead of beating you over the head, to try and instill that information, it's like, here, let me teach you this breathing practice or this meditation or this chant or this song, or let's have a beautiful interconnected heart-opening experience or conversation together that helps remind us that we're so much more than our limited circumstances or the titles that the world is willing to hand to us. So
It's funny that you said it's going to sound kind of hippie-ish, because my go-to is, oh, it sounds hippy-dippy. That's what I say. And what I don't understand is that sentiment because there isn't such a rigid structure? Because if you think about it, religion is kind of hippy-dippy, but it's just hippy-dippy in a more structured way, right? You're thinking, oh, there's this being out there who created everything, who does these things. He has this kingdom, and to get in there, you have to follow these structures. And then the flip side of that is, well, we're just cosmic beings, and we're just here for a finite amount of time, and it's about finding passions and cultivating those and just being a decent person and doing these things. Why does one get branded as hippie and the other is kind of the right thing to feel?
It's funny because, I heard the word religion and I my body kind of tenses
I know,
up a little. It feels more rigid.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel
the
in
same
the realm
as saying
of
cosmic.
hippie. It feels
Yeah.
very and the way I understand religion is almost more of an intellectual construct. It's trying to take this thing that we really don't understand. I have an uncle who is part of the Jesuit tradition and within
I'm not familiar with
Catholicism.
that.
Yeah, it's just a particular lineage within Catholicism. And I remember having a lovely conversation with him where he talked about, and he was very well aware that he and I didn't have the same, identical belief system. And we just had this wonderful moment in the conversation where we talked about kind of just, engaging with the mystery. And I was like, oh, yeah, like that, we can both say yes to this, even though he has a different idea about the mystery and I have a different one. That's what we're doing. And so I think, religion, in my limited, vantage point, seems to like it attempts to take this thing that's so big and so really incomprehensible. Who are we? What's the nature of being? What happens when you die? Where do we come from? What are we here for? And bring it down and make it this kind of linear, intellectualized, codified, like do these steps. Whereas, spirituality could be anything, right? Like I could have a flower picking practice. Actually, that's probably not a bad idea. But it could be whatever I want it to be, which has a shadow side as well. I mean, like, we've seen, in the last couple years, what happens when, people are allowed to kind of cherry pick their own facts and be like, well, that's not part of my spiritual path. Or, it's like, But yeah, it's interesting, that kind of that continuum from this really kind of rigid structure that says, no, we understand, to my flower picking practice or whatever. So yeah.
There's this, I'm gonna butcher this, so bear with me. There is this line of thinking that I believe it's Christianity and Catholicism as a whole, that it's just a misinterpretation of the Bible. There's this guy, and I'm going to throw out the name Terence McKenna. I don't think that's actually who wrote the book. Um, he is a guy who translated the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is the oldest form of the Bible in some sense. And his interpretation was that it was just a misinterpretation of a bunch of fertility rituals. I think the book is called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, or The Cross and the Sacred Mushroom, something like that. But that was his interpretation. He translated these scrolls, and he came out from it saying, we got it all wrong. The Bible is not this rigid structure of what life is supposed to be. It's fertility rituals, and I think they were, disguised and made more ambivalent so that other cultures couldn't interpret them correctly, and it just got passed down wrong, and people started adding in their own shit, and things started changing, and this started meaning this instead of that through language changes, and it was just not what it was supposed to be originally. It just got hammered down into this new thing that we present as, oh, this is the Bible.
Like
this
a 1,000-year-old game of telephone or
Yeah,
something.
imagine. I mean, think about, you get 10 people playing telephone and it's completely off. Imagine hundreds of thousands of years or however far that goes back. I mean, people are so malleable, and then somebody starts throwing in their own things because they don't agree with this, and then
Well, yeah, exactly. None of us are neutral vessels.
Yeah, we're all biased.
If you were to give me, words on a piece of paper and say, okay, Amy, I want you to get this information to these people, and then, something were to happen to you and all I have left is your piece of paper. If it's within my rights. You left me this piece of paper, your final record here. I don't really like the way Nick put this here, so I'm going to put this word instead, which actually has a totally different meaning. Yeah, that many, fallible vessels passing down information, and I mean, it's a lot of this is the history of colonialism too, right? I mean, if you look at our Christian holidays, like Christmas, I'm pretty sure the baby Jesus was not born in December, but we did have, the celebration of the winter solstice that, pagan earth-based cultures had been celebrating and commemorating, and having Yule logs and, adorning trees as a way to connect to and honor the cycles of the earth. That had been happening. So it was like, hey, let's just take that and put a manger next to it.
Just start
we
fitting
got
pieces together.
So it's true. I mean, there's nothing infallible about that lineage, about any lineage, like all of them.
Scientology.
Oh, God.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That was the perfect response.
Yeah.
I mean, how crazy is that? And people are diehard with it.
I think it's just, we want, again, it's that
That
desire,
want to believe.
that desire for, I think it's a desire for certainty, to know that you can count on something, I think it's just, and if someone, and especially the people that, peddle, especially like a for-profit religion like Scientology, I mean, like there are some charismatic people, selling snake oil. Like, I get it, if there's that, I mean, I think because we all have that, I think we're hardwired to we want meaning. I think we want to have some sense of who we are in the grand scheme of things, to know, our place in all of this seemingly chaotic, world that we're in. I think we want to have a sense of purpose. And religion's a really powerful tool to deliver that, So again, it can be a weaponized tool as well, and has been historically over human civilization, unfortunately. So
Language wielded by charismatic people can be a force to reckon with. That's all it takes, is one person that is articulate and compassionate and can get their message disseminated amongst however many people, and just there's this innate will or desire to believe and to trust another person, and that just gets played on. I don't know if that's because, throughout history, you have to trust the person next to you. If you're in these small
Mm.
hunter-gatherer groups,
Hmm.
right, you evolve that way where that's the only way you survive is in your group. And so now we're just more inclined to trust, especially if it comes from a charismatic person.
Hmm.
But that gets taken advantage of. Take your politicians who just sell you the line of goods and never deliver. And we believe them each and every time. And we
Yeah.
want to hope that this is the one. This person's actually gonna help me.
Yeah. I know. I don't remember how old I was. I'd have to go back and do the math. But so when Barack Obama was elected, I was at the time going to Del Arte, which I'm trying to think, and Obama came on the heels of what, Bush. And so going from, when we back then thought Bush was like as bad as it could get, it seems so cute and naive now. But I remember standing in the then lager bar before it had been all prettified and gentrified, shoulder to shoulder in this cramped room of, queer, non-binary, just this beautiful array of artists and actors and clowns at this, wonderful little theater school, staring up at the television, watching, Barack Obama give his acceptance speech. And we had so completely, yes, we can do this. And we are the change we've been waiting for. And, all the things that he, got elected on, and crying, genuinely crying, because there was such a need to believe that someone, and he was so likable and such a wonderful, noble figure. And if you, again, like you say, you look at his record, it's like, oh, he kind of just did the same thing that your predecessors had done. Maybe you got some healthcare bills through. Maybe you did, but you also, handed this huge corporate bailout
And all the
um,
drone strikes.
yeah, exactly.
I
So,
can remember, I don't know if I was in 3rd grade or 6th grade, but we were out on a camping trip. And we were in our cabin. It was kind of late at night. And I can remember our teacher running in, opening the door and saying, Obama won. And we all cheered because we just intuitively knew, well, none of us knew politics. We didn't know what Obama's platform was or what he stood for as a person. But we knew that it was a historic moment. And we were wrapped up in the idea that this was a movement of change. And then now looking back, it was just more of the same. Just a different
theater.
face.
Yeah.
Just a different face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how often does that cycle repeat itself? I mean, track that one back.
Well, and it's interesting too. So I watched in myself and in some of the people around me, my peers, because we all, so many of us, especially if, you identify as progressive, right? There was this feeling of kind of being rescued, of being saved, right? When Obama got into the White House, it was like, he's going to come and he's going to do it all. He's going to save us. He's going to turn us around and he's going to make all the right choices and get us off the path we're on. And then fast forward to, 2016, and there was the complete opposite. It was like, oh my God, now there's this crazy person, this, power hungry, dangerous person at the helm. And he definitely is not going to do anything that is going to build the kind of country that I want to live in. And so in a way, it mobilized people. I watched people get politically active that had never been politically active in their lives. Like I married a surfer who's just like, he's part 8 years old, part 80, like he wants to be in the ocean. He wants to make art. He wants to be in nature. He's like, I don't want to get drowned in all that, shit show of politics. And it was bad enough that he was like, okay, I'm paying attention now. Like, things are bad. What do I need to do? And you saw that a lot. There was something powerful about having not, charismatic figure, yes, but, knowing that the change that you wanted to see was not going to happen from the top. And so you saw all of a sudden this groundswell of people coming from the bottom of the power structure and saying, we're gonna make the changes. So, I mean, there's something to be said for not just looking to the top of the pyramid, I guess, just for that type of wide sweeping systemic change that we're all, hoping for. So,
Well, it has to start at the bottom.
yeah.
That's the problem.
Hmm.
And we kind of, as a society, have fallen asleep at the wheel in some regard.
It's by design, I feel like, if you, it's just, I mean, just look at, the cost of living right now,
Well, it's
it's
hard to pay
like
attention to politics when food is so expensive, gas
freaking
is so expensive.
exhausted.
How do you pay attention to these more abstract concepts when you're just trying to get by day to
Hmm.
day?
Well, and then, we all carry these little things around in our pocket that are like, instant dopamine dispensers. And at heart, we just want to feel good, So it's way easier just to kind of like, I don't know, go play words with friends or, double click on a bunch of pictures of strangers or whatever than it is to turn towards the immense difficulties that we're facing, like that shit's hard, and there's no clear path to wide sweeping change, it's a lot easier. And again, I think it's by design. Um, it's interesting when they're passing all the, like the new student loan forgiveness plan. And I remember seeing, someone tweeted basically like that, they were giving away at a time when recruitment is really, really low, they're giving away one of the Army, the Navy, the
Big selling
armed forces.
points.
Yeah, exactly. Because the idea is like, if we can keep people poor, if we can keep people indebted, if we can keep people distracted, if we can just keep people busy until they die, then we up here at the top can just kind of do whatever we want. But we have to make sure that they're not paying attention, or they're too tired, or they're too overwhelmed, or they're just, too busy watching Netflix to lean in and start to, overturn the oligarchy, so to speak. So, I don't know where I was going with that,
But that is a big issue. I was reading an article the other day that across all of the armed forces, recruitment is at an all-time low. And now you do have the idea, which is the flip side, in that not only will taking away those student loans decentivize people from joining the military, but it's also this idea that it's not fair because I had to pay mine back and now you don't have to pay yours back. No, which is a concept I always struggle with. You would think that you struggled so that your kids wouldn't have to struggle. Like, you went through this process, you didn't enjoy it. Nobody likes paying back student loans.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you want that to be propagated to the next generation if it doesn't have to be.
Well, and it may not even be generational. If I'm 35 and just made my last student loan payment, and you're like, oh, I just got a third of my stuff. It is like, you're not my kid, like I'm not invested
screw
in
you.
you.
Why are you getting it wiped?
And again, that's that kind of toxic culture of individualism, which is part of how we're entrained in this country to be is, look out for yourself. We're not, it's, I mean, if you just look at like the COVID response, it's like it quickly dissipated down into, we went from like, everybody stay home, look out for each other. This is the way that we practice caring for one another. Or, when masks became a thing and it was like, yeah, this is how we do community care, to eventually like, screw you, this mask is uncomfortable, I don't like breathing my own air. Or, we don't have a very good track record or even practice or even pathway to follow for how we do collective care in this country. So yeah, it's very easy to rather than look at the bigger picture and think, oh, if I have people, all my neighbors and the generation coming up after me isn't drowning in debt and is able to like put their efforts towards, some of the systemic changes we need, then actually we all benefit. It's so much easier to zero in on that one piece. It's like, why do you get gum and I don't have gum? I had to buy my own gum. Like, it's what the culture teaches us, It's like, worry about you. That's your biggest thing you can do. It's
the only thing. It's the most important thing. You, putting you first. And the idea of collective care, even in COVID, I think it started out with good intentions that people were actually looking out for each other. But it seemed like it was co-opted pretty quick, and it just became this catch-all guilt trip of I'm going to tell you what to do, and if you don't listen, you are now a bad person,
Mm.
and we need to deal with you. Or what do you
Yeah,
think on that?
I to me, so obviously, a lot of parents, right, have had a lot of different feelings about masking and vaccine mandates and stuff like that. And I agree, once you get a certain level of bureaucracy and, a toxic government that doesn't truly represent or care for the needs of its people involved and overseeing the program, like, yeah, it is going to be tainted. Absolutely. Um, and especially, you involve for-profit medicine in the deal. Like, yeah, there's
It
just
starts getting
so
dicey. Yeah.
many bad players at the table all of a sudden. Um, I mean, but and granted, so my child is neurotypical. She's doesn't have any physical disabilities, so she's doing fine. No special needs there. And so the masking was not a problem. It wasn't affecting her learning. I mean, no one wants to wear the damn thing. But one thing that I noticed, is it was teaching her really, really at this young age about consent, because we would learn how to go into a place and ask, can I hug you? Um, do you want me to put my mask on? Would that make you feel safer? Because I may not need this thing, I'm in a body that doesn't have special needs. I'm in a body that doesn't have, immunocompromised stuff going on. But maybe you are in a body. Maybe you're in contact with a beloved elder who is going through chemo or something, so it really, no one loved masks. I was actually having a fun time earlier in my house today, like, throwing away old ones because I was like, I don't think we're wearing these anymore. Yeah. But I think we missed in the process, there was this important process happening where we were inadvertently learning about pausing, not just doing the thing we want to do because it's easiest and most comfortable for us, but like connecting with the person in front of us. What do I need to do to make you feel safe? What do I need to do to make you okay so that we can be together in this space? And I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing to learn, I hope that she carries that with her into other avenues of her life. I hope she encounters other people who are willing in one form or another to be like, what do to ask those questions. What do you need from me to feel safe? What do you need from me to feel fully welcome here in this environment? And in a way, some of our safety COVID protocols, were ways of learning that together.
Do you think that gets dangerous when it gets extreme? And that there's this quote that I love, and I cannot remember who it's by, but it's prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child. And it seems like,
Mm.
especially even prior to COVID, we were trying to conform the world to this place that it isn't. Almost like bubble wrapping the world, right? So everybody's got to be nice to you. Everybody has to.
Raising little snowflake
Yeah,
children. Yeah.
I wouldn't phrase it like that, but yeah,
Yeah.
that is the trope, right? Is
Yeah.
we're creating a generation of soft snowflakes.
I think, it's a good question. I definitely, and I think maybe it's a little early to say, frankly. It's interesting. So a lot of, the practices that I engage with, particularly, when I'm facilitating small groups and stuff at the fellowship, I go through a practice of, I ask people to say their preferred pronouns. And that's just become common practice. I mean, like if I'm working with teenagers, they're like, boom, 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 and it's no thing. Even my kid, she's kind of just learning. She, doesn't use that in most circles, but there's places she's like, okay, yeah, preferred pronouns. Um, I get some pushback from some people who are, quite a bit older, in their 70s. It's just not a lot, but some just like, this is ridiculous. And again, it's a thing of creating a space where everyone feels welcome because the other end of that is just assuming, I look at you and say, okay, I know who you are. Like you don't get to define who you are. I get to define who you are according to my rubric. It's just like, because you have facial hair, you must be this. Because you have, like dark eyes, you must be this. And it gets into this slippery slope of like, all of a sudden I'm defining from my limited perspective, as a white middle-aged woman, I'm defining who you are rather than letting you tell me, actually, no, I don't fit into that category. I'm this, even though you can't see it immediately. And so I think, my generation wasn't raised with anything like that. You didn't get to define who you were, It's like you were who they told you to be. And I think that did a lot of harm. And so maybe we're in a moment where we're overcorrecting,
The pendulum swing.
we're being really, really delicate, and we're learning all these new ways of relating and languaging and creating space together. And it, at times can feel a little bit like, oi, like, how many letters are in the LGBTQIA? I mean, like, and I think it's a necessary passage that we're moving through. Is that the kind of thing that's going to create delicate, breakable children and adults? I don't think so. I don't think so. If anything, I think telling them, I think if anything, giving them everything they want for Christmas, which was like the practice, probably is still the practice, like in the 90s, I think, yeah, it's like spoiling them through, consumption and all of that, that I think is going to raise, pretty unresilient humans. But I think teaching them to be sensitive and inclusive and respectful and seeking consent, I don't know. I don't think it's going to do any harm in the long run, is my feeling right now. So,
Yeah, I don't know. And obviously I don't have kids, so I'm just, throwing spitballs. But it's interesting watching the change in society, especially when it comes to gender and gender conformity and putting people in these boxes. I think part of me thinks that the only reason we're swinging this far now is because society as a whole it was pretty good. We definitely have a lot of problems, and I always have to say that because we do. We have things we need to work on as a society and things we need to change and people we need to help. But as a whole, I think society, and pre-COVID, I think society was pretty okay. You didn't have to worry about a lot of things. We had the veneer of society in the sense of safety, and you can walk outside and most times you're going to be okay, and you can go to work and you can do these things and you can have a social life and you're going to be okay. You might struggle a little bit and it might get hard, but you're going to be okay. And there's another quote that hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And I think we're kind of towards the end of that process where we have the good time and we might be creating people that are going to take us back to a hard time. I think a wake-up call would be a war. We're kind of dancing on a lot of fronts with that now. I think that would be a wake-up call, in that things like real struggle is out there and real hardship, and war, I think, is a great provider of a very unfortunate side of humanity, seeing what people are really capable of. It's interesting in that now, and maybe for the first time, we can really see a lot of the documentation of that. I mean, you have people TikToking out of Ukraine, which, how crazy is that? You're in a war zone and you're seeing live feed from that war. We've never had that. We've had clips from World War II that are, black and white or have been colorized, but it's never been live. It's never been right there that you can just reach out. Oh, here's a live video of somebody getting shot, or of these people torturing this person or doing these atrocities. I'm interested to see how that affects our psyche. If it progresses, if it stays where it is, if we shut it down and keep moving like we were before.
Well, yeah. So I guess there's a couple of things I want to touch on there. It's interesting. So to my mind, pre-COVID, I don't think things were okay. I was one of those people early on when the world literally shut down. I was like, maybe this will be
What it needs.
well, I mean, to my vantage point, we're in a moment of collapse. The systems we have in place, our economic systems, our energy systems, pretty much every way we are doing this thing of being human on the planet is completely untenable. Like we have been taking resources at a rate, out of the earth at a rate much greater than we can replenish them. We have been trying to extract more and more and more from, the working class while, the wealth gap climbs. And so, I mean, and creating, more and more disconnection and disillusionment and conflict amongst, just humanity so, I mean, to my mind, yeah, things weren't okay pre-COVID, So I was definitely one of those people that was just like, I don't want to go back to what we had. That was not a utopian thing. That was very dystopian. It was more comfortable, but it wasn't, there wasn't, to my mind, anything okay about what and if anything, it was one of those people early in the pandemic that was like, this is going to be the great shift, like we're going to, certain systems are going to collapse. We're going to be able to rebuild from the ashes and create this new way forward. And if anything, it's just, and these, you mentioned the bit about, getting live feeds from Ukraine. If information was the only thing it took to change people, I think we would have made the kind of changes we need to already, we know now, I mean, because that's the whole, great hope of all of Silicon Valley, right? It's just like more information, more data, like at quicker speeds, people will have all the information all the time. And it hasn't made us more humane. It hasn't made us more compassionate. It hasn't made us stop in our tracks and go, oh my God, what is happening? What have we become? And what can I do about it? More information has not done that. If anything, it's made it all one big hodgepodge. It's like, oh, here's something horrible. Keep scrolling. Oh, here's something kind of, here's what, Trevor Noah has to say about the situation. Oh, keep scrolling, and we just keep scrolling, and there's nothing that lands inside of our heart, which I think is where any real shift needs to originate, So, I even forget how we started this piece of the conversation, but I don't know
if it'll bring about the change that people want.
I suspect not, I don't think,
We're
yeah.
definitely desensitized. There's no argument against that because of what we've seen, because of, well, yeah, predominantly what we've seen, because you have access to see anything. When I'm talking about change, I don't mean it in the terms of getting that information. I mean it more so in terms of war itself. I think war is a, how do I want to phrase this? I think war is a great medium for change, in that when you pass through that, it is almost impossible for you to stay the same person. I would imagine, again, I'm speaking as someone who has never been to war, but just you hear these stories of what soldiers have gone through, of what they've done, what they've had to do to survive, what people on the opposite, I mean, take a look at World War II and the gassings, take a look at World War I and the trench warfare and what that looked like. The Vietnam War, I mean, if you look back at how horrific those were, and it tracks that it's just getting more horrific, but in a different sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you could go through that and experience that and be the exact person you were when you went in. I don't think you'd be even close. I think it would have to instill in you
Well, and I think
different
statistically,
change.
if you look at veterans coming home from any of our recent wars, I mean, we know they're not the same people that went
Yeah.
in. They're dealing with serious trauma and post traumatic stress disorder, and they don't have the resources available to reintegrate and to be part of this society. I mean, as far as maybe it's going to take a war in order to shake us up. it seems to me, some of the pieces of that are like, what are the things that bond you in together as soldiers in a war is like, you believe you have a common enemy. You believe because someone has told you and, you've taken it into your being as gospel truth that you are on the right side and you're fighting for something that is true and good and, will save the world as we know it. And you're bonded by trauma because you're seeing unspeakable shit every single day that no one else in civilian life understands. And so, I mean, if those are the terms that we're looking at, we're there. If you're a Black person living in America, you are living under the conditions of war. If you are,
That's a pretty broad statement, don't you think? I would say it's not. Here's the thing: it's not great. There's definitely systemic racism, and there are definitely factors in that, even factors that branch across race. And
mhm.
I'm a big believer that the common underlying theme is economic status.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one. We can call it race, we can call it these other things, but your economic status is really going to determine
Well,
most
and
of life.
I
But
mean, so
here's the thing. You in this country, and this is why I say we're doing pretty good, you can overcome that. A Black person can be president, an Asian
oh,
person can be CEO.
but I mean,
You can but this is
I
almost the
would
one
argue
country
that
where you can do that though, where you can you have poor people every day that rise up and become a millionaire. It's hard and it's not easy, and there are a lot of sacrifices that you go through to get there. That's why most people don't. But it's almost like when you were 16 and you have that door open, it's the possibility of this is something that you can achieve
mm,
that is unique, I think, to us in a lot of ways.
mm.
If you go to these other countries, especially in the Middle East, they're still beheading people for being gay. And here we are and I get the comparison thing. That's a dangerous road to go down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I think it is also important in that it shows you how far you have come, right? Not
Well,
necessarily as a society, but as a people.
so I think I would argue, I mean, statistically, I think, just looking at, how the cost of living has skyrocketed over the last 30 years and wages have basically, over the whole country have stagnated since like, the late 80s, early 90s. I would say that kind of great American hope, that myth of upward mobility and anybody can be president, anybody can rise to be a millionaire. I would argue that it's exactly that, a myth. And it's another way to kind of keep people like nose to the grindstone, working 50, 60-hour weeks, so that maybe one day they can achieve that hope. I would go so far as to say that it's actually a lie, that the statistics don't actually support that at this point in time. That's my vantage point. And, beyond, beyond just even the race issue, I think just, back to that, question of, is the war here? Look at the effects of climate change and the people that are being driven from their homes. Look at like, what's happening in, look at Pakistan, look at China, look at, the people in Kentucky, right? Who are never going to recover the homes and the valuables that they've lost, might be permanently displaced. Look at all the people globally who are being displaced um, by climate change, and we're just beginning to see that unfurl. Look at all the people who want to basically strip all Americans of their voting rights, who fall under the Marjorie Taylor Greene and, Trump camps who, want to take, they believe they have the right way to do this country, and they're willing to fight for it, and even so far as to like rewrite our Constitution in order to do it. I think the war is here. I just don't know that it's showing up in a way that is instantly recognizable to us. Um, is my thought on that. So
We're definitely on shaky ground. We're definitely on shaky ground. And I don't know if, again, that just ties back to things were good and now they're going bad as the cycle continues, or we have just become so desensitized to everything that we're gonna sleepwalk into danger. I don't know. But I think I I I don't know if I'm just naive because I'm 24 and so I want to be more idealistic than is good for me, or you look at the world with some tinge of rose-colored glasses. I Hearing you talk about the American dream and how it's kind of fading, or if it was a facade from the start, I've heard that a lot from people that have come on here, and that worries me. It really does, because if we don't have these, it worries me because I want to believe that it's true. I want to believe that it is hard and it's difficult and it's not for everyone. Unfortunately, it's just not, because most people won't put in the work that is required to get there. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I want to believe that it's still achievable, and I want us to believe in these fundamental values of our country, and that we can all come together and we can achieve these great things. And your neighbor might look different from you, they might have a different background, but they are still your neighbor, and you should care for them and you should love them, and we should lift each other up because we are a country and we are a people, and together we are stronger than we are separate. And when I hear people talk about how these ideals are dying and we don't have that connect, it worries me,
Well,
because where do we go from that if
right.
we start losing our connection as a country, and that breaks down, and then we start losing our connection as a people? What happens to the country? Do we just fall apart? Is unity being broken down to a point where we can't save it? Is that where we go?
So again, I think it almost kind of circles back to that earlier conversation around, you know, can you keep someone constrained inside a system or a house or a religion, um, based on a false narrative, based on only giving them a very tiny portion of the truth of the, because if we look at, if we're talking about the foundation of this country, all those things written into the Bill of Rights, those weren't true for, that wasn't true for Indigenous people. That wasn't true for if you were a person in a black body. That wasn't true for women. It was true for wealthy white land owning men. So our ideals have never been carried out in practice. They were these really, really very aspirational, wonderful things on paper. And I agree, let's work towards that. But we can't just say, oh, this is what our country's founded on. This is what we have been. Let's return to this. It's not a returning. It's a rectifying. It's a coming, for lack of a better term, it's a come to Jesus moment of actually looking at the truth of our origins and what kind of violence and, horrible things did we have to, as those of us, as, the coming generations of, our ancestors, if you're white identifying, it was my ancestors, right, that perpetrated a lot of this, genocide and stealing of land. And so, I mean, these were never the things that we were truly founded on. They were ideals that we ascribe to, again, right? That thing about talking about what we believe in, but we never, from the get-go, we have never embodied it. And so maybe it's not so much about a returning to a unity, a false unity, because it was not a unity. I mean, like if you were an Indigenous, Native American, quote unquote, person, there was no unity. There was we're going to take your land and we're going to force you onto the most undesirable piece of this continent that we can find for you. And we are going to force you to sign this treaty, right? If you are a person in a black body, like same thing, like you don't have any rights. There's no unity. You get to be conscripted into this role, whether you like it or not, so that this segment of the society can have a false sense of peace, a false sense of flourishing, a false sense of unity. Everything's exactly how, and we'll use religion too. God wants it this way. God made the black person, the brown person less than the white person so that they could, work on our behalf for this great nation. So it's like, it's the same thing I think of, like leaving your childhood religion once you finally see, oh, that's not the whole truth of the story. That was this tiny sliver that kept me behaving in a certain way, right? And so we almost need to apply that to the whole way that we're looking at our current situation. Is we can't keep going back to this old false narrative and expect to get a different result. We need to be willing to do that brave work of unraveling the narrative and looking at some of the really, really dark origins of our story. And then, through that reparations, that healing, that, coming to terms with and making amends for, we only get there through that, like,
Yeah, I don't believe in these ideals as a set of things we should return to. I think it's a mark that we're striving for. I don't think we've ever hit it. And quite frankly, I don't know if we ever will hit it. But it's the idea that each generation we're getting better. We're trying to be more. We're trying to get closer. The idea that they created the Bill of Rights back then, it is an incredible piece of work, and what it stands for is incredible. Did they implement it the way that they wrote it back then? Absolutely not. But are we implementing it better today? Yeah. I don't Are we 100%? No. Will we be 100% tomorrow? Probably not. But can we be more tomorrow than we are today? That's the line of thinking that I subscribe to. And that it's not perfect. It has never been perfect. But if we're better tomorrow than we were today or yesterday, I think that is progress. And I think people get a little, I don't know if it's jaded or frustrated in the sense that that speed of progress isn't quite where they would want it to be. They want us to fix the problem today and have it not be a problem tomorrow. But some problems take time. They take time because people aren't interested. They take time because it's just the size of the problem, the size of turning the ship. That's a big one, where we are a country of 300 and something million people. To change things that have been generational or institutional, it's hard work. And you have to start with, the people at the bottom and work your way up. And I think it gets dangerous when people want that to happen faster than it does. Not that it should, because change, take racism. That should not be a problem today. It just shouldn't. We know too much. We've experienced too much. You have all the information in your pocket. The idea that you still think someone is less or different than you because they're like, that's like Scientology, but more dumb, I guess.
Well, I think, I want to just touch on, what you say about kind of the big ship. And I think that is like,
is that a cop out? Is that
no,
what
no, no.
Oh.
I actually, no, because I look, as one individual with limited time, money, status in this society, I have very limited influence to steer that size of a ship. If I have none, I will say that I have none. And so I think, that knowing is kind of what drives the other type of work that I want to do in this world. It's why I want to be involved in small communities that are values driven, that are like coming together and saying, this is the kind of world that we want to live in. What are we going to do about it? And it might just look like, as small, quote unquote, as like a community garden. It might look as small as like having really deliberate, heartfelt conversations about how we're parenting, and how we're teaching values of inclusion and accessibility, teaching our kids to be anti-racists. And, it's because I know I have so little ability to help steer the big ship that I'm really, really invested in the little ships, if we're staying with that analogy, that I'm a part of, because I know I can have an impact. I know that I can help be a part of important micro movements and conversations. And I don't know that there's any other way really to jettison change.
It happens, right? Is you have to turn the smaller ones first before you can tackle the big one. You can't just turn the ship of this size. You have to start with the people and these communities, right. And then you change one person, and then that person changes someone.
Yeah.
And soon you've changed a city, and then you've changed a state, and then you've got the country.
Yeah.
You just can't start with the country. There's too many people. It's not as feasible as it was back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, we were a lot smaller group of people when we first
it was easier to get something done. There were like 50 people, and you're right next to each other, and you just write some new shit on a piece of paper, and that's the law of the land.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore.
Yeah. So, I think ultimately, I get really inspired by, there's that quote by Buckminster Fuller where he talks about, like you don't create change by trying to rewrite the existing system. You know, you create something that is so completely different and so much more beautiful and better and, you know, altogether separate than what we have now, that there's no other choice but to turn towards that new idea, that new alternative. So I think that's what drives a lot of the tiny little work that I do.
Well, it's easy to see that you're passionate about it, and that it sounds like that's big passion behind working with HUUF, is using that as an outreach tool and trying to make those changes and be the change that you want to see, which I think is important. I think that's what most people want.
Well, and I think it's too, you know, it's like, and you know, here you are with, you know, you've done all the work to like outfit this place and do the very hard work of like interviews and editing and you
It's
know
not
all
that
the.
bad. I mean,
But
there are
it's a
worse jobs
thing.
for
No
sure.
one's like, here's this money, go do this thing. Like you are self-electing to create this, and I think it just speaks to, again, that thing. It's like, you know, we all feel on some level, and you know, it gets more as I get older, as I'm learning, like you become very much aware. We're like, whoa, okay, I only get one shot at this. Like, what do I want to do with it? But I think there's this feeling we want to, you know, beyond the American dream of success or a certain, you know, level of economic security, is like we want to feel like what we did with this, you know, gift of being in a human body for however long we get to be, you know, we left something behind that holds meaning for us, you know? And I think that's, you know, that's why you're doing this. That's why, you know, I do what I do. And so many other people, is because I think they're driven by that need to know that when they, you know, they have their own dream beyond the American dream. Is like, when I look back on my life, I want to know that I did something that held meaning and purpose. Even if it was just really good parenting. And I want to go, not say just, you know, like,
because that's a big thing.
right. You know, even if it was a, you know, it was a podcast, it was a part-time job, it was a, you know, it was a partnership, it was a tiny little business that made people feel good and didn't, you know, like rape the earth in the process, you know. I think at the end of the day, just, it's this, all these little sparks, you know, wanting to make something meaningful while we're here. So.
Money and success will only get you so far. You need to find that thing that fills you up and makes you feel like it's all worth it, and that you're maybe not even giving back in a sense, but you're doing something that holds meaning to you. You have to find whatever that thing is, whatever form it takes. You have to find that. Otherwise, it's all, well, I mean, what are you doing? What's the point of it all? Okay, well, Amy, that was all. I really enjoyed talking with you. I had a lot of fun.
I did too. Thank you. I'm so impressed that you just off the cuff with all your questions.
Yeah,
You're just like, just whatever comes to me in the moment is the right thing.
Yeah.
That's great.
Do you want to plug where people can find you, where they can find HUUF?
Oh, goodness,
outreach?
Yes. If this conversation, this wide-ranging conversation that is only one, you know, little tributary of a representation of the people you will find at the fellowship, if it has compelled you to look more into that community, yeah, you can go to our website, HUUF.org. It'll just show you what we got going on with Sunday services and community programs and stuff for families and stuff like that. Yeah. And beyond that, yeah, if you want to go back and check out the podcast that's just living there, there's that too. So,
okay. And what was the name of the podcast again?
Mendpodcast.com is where you'll find that one. So Mend. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Amy, thank you so much. Really, I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was fun.